Namaste. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Namaste. Good morning and a very warm welcome to all who've joined us online for the expert lecture on the India-China standoff. On behalf of the School of Military Affairs, Strategy and Logistics, Rashtriya Raksha University, I take great privilege in introducing the speaker for the lecture today, Lieutenant General Dr. Subrata Saha, veteran. Currently Director and Dean of the School of Military Affairs, Strategy and Logistics RRU, and member of the National Security Advisory Board, Lieutenant General Subrata Saha retired as Deputy Chief of the Army Staff. He was responsible for perspective planning, force modernization, and capability development. He created the Army Design Bureau in 2016. Post-retirement, he was the founding Director General of the Society for Indian Defence Manufacturers. He's a recipient of the Param Vishesh Seva Medal, Uttam Yudh Seva Medal, Yudh Seva Medal, two-time recipient of the Vishesh Seva Medal, two-time recipient of the Chief of Army Staff Commendation, and the General Officer Commanding-in-Chief Western Command Commendation Card. His in-depth strategic insight is based on his experience as 15 Corps Commander in Kashmir, 2014 to 15, Additional Director General, Military Operations 2013 to 14, Division Commander in Strike Corps, Brigade Commander on the LOC in High Altitude, Battalion Commander in Counter-Terrorism in Assam, Company Commander in Counter-Terrorism in Punjab, and for 6 months on the Siachen Glacier in the early days of the Glacier War in 1986, and Deputy Regional Commander, United Nations Mission in Angola in 1996 to 1997. His academic qualifications include PhD in Irregular Warfare, MPhil, double master's degree from Madras University and Pennsylvania, and a diploma in management. He's the only Indian Army officer who's a graduate of both Staff College, Camberley, United Kingdom, and United States of America Army War College. He was adjudged the best student, overseas student at Staff College, Camberley, and awarded the gold medal at Higher Command course. Sir is a distinguished fellow of the Center for Joint Warfare Studies. His articles, papers, and opinion pieces are widely published in Indian and foreign journals. He contributed a chapter on out-of-area operations in a book titled Military Strategy for India in the 21st Century, published by the Center for Land Warfare Studies, India, and a chapter on indigenization of defense manufacturing in India in the USI Strategic Yearbook 2019. We warmly welcome you, sir. Greatly looking forward to your valuable insights. As part of the BA Defense and Strategic course held at the university, it is important that students and researchers in this field are updated about the strategic significance of India's neighborhood and, on a larger scale, India's relationship with the world. The geopolitical and economical strategic development across the world has significant bearing on the country's national security and is therefore of crucial importance for studies as part of the curriculum. For our batch of the BA Defense and Strategic Studies and for other courses being run at RRU, we are organizing this expert lecture on this very important topic of India-China relations. I kindly request Lieutenant General Dr. Subrata Saha to enlighten us and give us a comprehensive understanding of the topic. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Nirmal. Good morning, I'll say ladies and gentlemen, and Jai Hind and Tagda Raho. Tagda Raho means be strong. I welcome each one of you to this talk on India-China standoff. I am very clear that my primary audience today are the participants of the Rashtriya Raksha University bachelor's degree in Defense and Strategic Studies. They are my primary participants. Equally, I'm conscious of the fact that there are many guest participants also. So a warm and special welcome to each one. I can see on my screen, my guide, PhD guide is also there. Very kind of you, sir, to attend, and warm welcome to you also. I must mention to the gathering today that very recently we received a feedback that some of the participants whose background is neither in English nor in Hindi, for example, Gujarati medium, they are having some problems of comprehension. So for them, firstly, Kemcho, Majama, and Nutan Varshna Abhinandan. So I must tell you that we are addressing this problem. So to begin with, anybody who has any such comprehension problem, I will request कि आप एक मेल बना करके जो आपको परेशानी पेश हो रही है उसको आप कर्नल दीपक जोशी जो हमारे चीफ इंस्ट्रक्टर हैं उनके पास भिजवाइए. We will find ways to solve your problem, number one. Number two, I will also inform you that after we got the feedback, we discussed this issue in the heads of departments meeting, and it has been decided, the Vice Chancellor has given his approval, that as part of our Center for Personality Development, where we were creating the Center for Personality Development around training people for Services Selection Board, उसमें अभी हम इसमें कम्युनिकेशन स्किल्स भी शामिल कर देंगे. कम्युनिकेशन स्किल्स यानी प्रत्यान्य कौशल्य, इसके ऊपर भी हम आप इसमें ऐड करेंगे ताकि जिसको प्रॉब्लम्स हैं कम्युनिकेशन स्किल्स की, we will see how to help you devote your time, basically private time, so that you can develop your communication skills. And not only do you become a reasonably competent security expert, you're also able to communicate well with others. तो ये हम ले आएंगे प्रोग्राम में. So let's come to today's topic, that is the India-China standoff. Like my friend Nirmal Matthews was introducing, I think that's a very important point कि side by side जब आप theory सीख रहे हैं defense and strategic studies का, समय समय पर we will try to cover for you current topics of security, national security and international security, ताकि आपको side by side समझ में आए कि how do you apply the knowledge which you are gaining. So today you can take it as the beginning of that series. I will try my best to be as often as I can with you to bring to you these current issues of national security and international security. So today we will talk about India-China standoff. So उससे पहले, before we come straight to the India-China standoff, we need to understand that इंडिया के जो नॉर्दर्न बॉर्डर्स हैं, जो हम कहते हैं नॉर्दर्न बॉर्डर्स, ये शुरू होता है फ्रॉम द वेस्ट, पश्चिम में, फ्रॉम द ट्राइजंक्शन ऑफ इंडिया, चाइना एंड अफगानिस्तान. सो पश्चिम में दैट इज द एक्सट्रीमिटी, और बिल्कुल पूरब में अगर हम चले जाएं, इट गोज टू द एक्सट्रीमिटी ऑफ इंडिया, तिब्बत एंड म्यांमार. ये पूरे बॉर्डर की लंबाई लगभग 3,488 किलोमीटर, 3,488 किलोमीटर है. और एक बात और हमें पता होना चाहिए कि मोस्टली, मतलब ज्यादातर इलाके पर दिस बॉर्डर इज अनडिमार्केटेड. सो दैट इज एट द रूट ऑफ मेनी प्रॉब्लम्स व्हिच वी विल बी टॉकिंग अबाउट एज वी सी. ये जो नॉर्दर्न बॉर्डर है हमारा चीन के साथ में, इसको हम 3 भागों में बांटते हैं. वी डिवाइड इट इनटू 3 पार्ट्स. Siddhartha, I've got your message. We'll have to manage with Hindi and English both. In India, we have people who understand English, we have people who understand Hindi, and multiple other languages. We have to take everybody along, but I take your message. We'll try to give you both in Hindi and English. I've got your message, Siddhartha. Okay, now, this border ko we divide it into 3 parts. On the western side, we call the western sector. That is primarily the border that we have with Ladakh, with the Union Territory of Ladakh. Then we come to the middle sector, which is the border which is there with Himachal and Uttarakhand with Tibet. And if you go to the eastern sector, we are talking about the border which is there from the tri-junction between India, Tibet, Bhutan, and on the other side, India, Tibet, Myanmar. So pure border ko we divided into 3 sectors, as I said. Western sector on the Ladakh side, middle sector on the Uttarakhand, Himachal side, and the eastern sector primarily with Arunachal Pradesh. So today we will remain, because we are talking about the current standoff, we will remain focused to the western sector only. Other sectors I will find time to cover with you all separately. Just give me a second. I will just bring up a slide so that you are able to relate better to what I am saying. Just give me a second, please. Okay, so I assume all of you can see this slide which has been flashed in front of you. We will keep this as the background और इसको देख करके we will try to understand how did the borders evolve over a period of time in the western sector. In 1684, there was a treaty which was signed called Treaty of Tingmosang. Treaty of Tingmosang. This was signed between the Namgyal of Ladakh and the Tibetan government. This treaty recognized that Ladakh will be an independent entity, independent of Tibet. And the border between Ladakh and Tibet was generally aligned in the area of Dimchok, which you see at the bottom of the slide. My laser pointer is going around it. Mincer, incidentally, which is here highlighted in yellow, was also part of the Ladakh province. This used to be called the Mincer enclave. After that, the next historical event that took place in this about this border was in 1841, 1842, when the war took place between the Sikh kingdom and the Tibet. At the end of the war, they signed a Treaty of Chushul. You can see Chushul prominently highlighted in green over here. I am taking my laser pointer around it. So this treaty was signed at Chushul. And according to this treaty, which was signed in 1842, they maintained the same status quo that Ladakh will be independent of Tibet. After 3 years, in 1845, 1846, the first Anglo-Sikh War was fought. In this Anglo-Sikh War, the British defeated the Sikhs. Because the British defeated the Sikhs, this area got placed under the British, and Britishers tried to demarcate the boundary, but they were not able to get any response from the Tibetan side, which was now under the control of China. But by and large, what the British did, they put Shaidullah as the northern extremity. You can see my highlighter going over the Shaidullah, which is shown in here, highlighted in green, and Demchok, which is bottom of your slide, highlighted in yellow. The two extremities were defined, but the area in between, where I am running my highlighter now, pointer now, area in between was largely, undefined. Then after another about 2 decades, in 1865, they tried to demarcate this boundary, and the first British line called 1865 Johnson Line came into being. According to this line, which was drawn by the British survey, the Aksai Chin, which you can see on the slide in front of you, highlighted in pinkish color here, over which I'm moving my pointer, Aksai Chin was made as part of the British domain, as part of the Ladakh region. So once Aksai Chin was made as part of Ladakh, Ladakh, as you all know, used to be part of the larger Jammu and Kashmir province. So Aksai Chin was made part of this. So accordingly, Maharaja Ranbir of Kashmir, he included Aksai Chin in the province of Ladakh, and an outpost was established in Shaidullah. They established an outpost in Shaidullah. Aksai Chin was made as a part of the Ladakh province by the British, and the same thing was endorsed by Maharaja Ranbir. 4 years later, in 1873, a line called the Foreign Office Line was formed. This line had a different view, and they thought that the boundary should be running from a place called Lanakla, going northwest along the Karakoram range. So Lanakla on this slide in front of you is highlighted here in pink. So roughly along the Karakoram range, you can see my pointer going. Along the Karakoram range, this is the Karakoram Pass. They made this as the boundary according to the 1873 Foreign Office Line. You can see it along the Karakoram range. The reason for this is given differently at different places. But by and large, what the British were worried about at this time, for those who are little familiar with the history, the British were worried about the Russians at this time as part of the larger great power game, which was happening at different parts of the world between the Britishers and the Russians. So they felt that probably it is easier to defend along the Karakoram, so they went for this line as the dividing line. This is the same line which continued to rule things in the future under different names, like McCartney-MacDonald line and so on. In 1897, one more line was formed, which decided to go back to the more or less older alignment of keeping the Aksai chain as part of Ladakh province. And they said Kunlun range, where my pointer is going now, Kunlun range should be the boundary. So again, they were looking at it, how to defend it from the Russians, and they thought it is better to go ahead of the Karakoram range, remain on the Kunlun as the line of defense. So this is what is known as the Johnson-Ardagh line of 1897. So they kept going back and forth, and then came one more line, which I mentioned a little while back, called McCartney-MacDonald line in 1899, which brought back the boundary to the area of the Karakoram range. As you can see, two different definitions of boundary in the British period, one along the Karakoram, the other along the Kunlun range, very broadly. What is relevant for us now is the Shimla Accord that took place in 1913-14. The Shimla Accord was, arrived at between representatives of Britain, China, and Tibet. वो तीनों के बीच में आपस में आकर के they signed the boundary agreement on 3rd July, even though the Chinese envoy, Mr. Yuan Chen, had signed the draft of the accord earlier, but the final treaty, which when it was signed, the Chinese chose to be away from it, so they did not sign it. So that is the sort of legal document which exists on this boundary, apart from all the other deliberations lines which are recorded in different places in different forms in history. So that's how the whole thing was formed. So now in 1957, China completed this road which was there from that time it used to be called Xinjiang, now it's called Xinjiang, to Lhasa. I'm running my pointer now along this road. It's marked in red on your on the slide, which you can see on your screen. So this is how the road was aligned. In 1957, this road was completed. 2 years down the line, important events happened in history. There was the revolt in Tibet, and Dalai Lama was granted asylum by India. And soon after that, the Chinese Prime Minister, he proposed a mutual withdrawal of armed forces by 20 kilometers from what he called the line of actual control, meaning whosoever is there as per their dispositions of their posts and pickets, let us make this as the line of actual control and have a buffer zone of around 20 kilometers. Basis this letter, a number of letters were exchanged up and down. Without going too much into detail, 3 sessions were held. They could not arrive at any conclusion. And in 1962, as you all know, there was this war between India and China. After the war, for a long, long time, there were no further diplomatic exchanges between India and China. There was a serious break in all kinds of diplomatic or communications between the two countries until nearly 1976. In 1976, India and China exchanged ambassadors, and a series of talks were held from 1981 to 88, and finally it culminated in the visit by the Indian Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi to China. Now, once again, some activities took place with respect to building up the relationship between the two countries. I will get away from this slide for a minute and okay, so after that, once the series of exchanges took place and they decided to make, some revert our relationship with the rebuild our relations with China. So first and foremost was the visit of the Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi in 1988 to China. Before that, not in this sector, but on the eastern sector that I mentioned, we had an incident called the Sumdrongchu. उसमें हुआ ये था कि the Chinese were coming to a grazing ground in this Sumdrongchu. Chu in Tibetan means a river. तो वहां पे ये लोग grazing वगैरह के लिए आते थे. So suddenly in 1986, along with the graziers, some PLA, matlab People's Liberation Army people of China, they also came along. So when they saw this movement, जो हमारे वहाँ पे graziers थे, they came back and reported to the IB. IB stands for Intelligence Bureau. They came back and reported to the IB that यहाँ पे China के भी soldiers आए हुए हैं, PLA soldiers have come. So therefore, Indian Army, when they were informed by the IB, they took a preemptive action and they occupied some heights that dominate the Sumdrongchu. Once these heights were occupied by the Indian Army, the PLA was actually taken by surprise. They did not think that Indian Army is going to react so strongly. And two things happened. One is an acceleration of activity on the diplomatic side so that they could resolve the boundary dispute. And in the process, what happened? That Sumdrongchu helped in expediting some of the agreements that came coinciding with Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi's visit to China in 1988. And as a follow-up from there, the first agreement, though for those of you who have been following news, you must have been hearing quite often in the news that all the agreements or 4 agreements have been violated by China. So the first agreement was signed in September 1993, which is called the Border Peace and Tranquility Agreement on how to be. So in many ways, it was a double effect of what happened in Sumdrongchu in the eastern sector. We'll talk about it on some other occasion. And the visit of the Prime Minister to China. After that, more negotiations were done. They formed expert groups and things like that. Without going too much into details, as you grow into your second and third year, we will talk much more about all this. But eventually, in 1996, we signed with China something called Agreement on Confidence Building Measures in the Field. So effectively, we were trying to see how can we manage these borders without going to war once more. By this time, the situation started to get better. Then Prime Minister Vajpayee also visited China. As a consequence of that, both sides decided to appoint something called the special representative. So from Indian side, हमारे हिंदुस्तान की तरफ से जो NSA है, National Security Advisor, आज की तारीख में जैसे श्री अजीत डोभाल हैं, तो उसी प्रकार से from the Chinese side they appointed one Jiang Shi as their SR, as their special representative. So the special representative were appointed so that they could resolve the boundary between the two countries in details. To assist them, they also found something called the working mechanism for consultation and coordination. So these arrangements kept going. And finally, in 2013, we signed an agreement on border defense cooperation. So that's how the whole process evolved. Now, on the one side, we were seeing attempts by both the sides to keep the border calm, keep the border peaceful, and find resolution to it. But by this time, changes started to happen in the Chinese leadership. And I think that is the beginning of the current standoff that we are seeing. For those of you, again, who follow history, जो इतिहास पे ध्यान आपका इतिहास के आप इंटरेस्ट लेते हैं, आपको ध्यान होगा 15 नवंबर 2012 में 15 नवंबर 2012 में शी जिनपिंग को, जो आज इनके प्रेसिडेंट हैं, शी जिनपिंग को चाइनीज कम्युनिस्ट पार्टी, इन शॉर्ट सीसीपी, चाइनीज कम्युनिस्ट पार्टी का जनरल सेक्रेटरी बनाया गया, और साथ ही साथ उन्हें चाइना की जो सेंट्रल मिलिट्री कमीशन है सीएमसी, दे मेड हिम द चेयरमैन ऑफ दैट. सो इन अदर वर्ड्स, पॉलिटिकल और मिलिट्री पावर दोनों इन्होंने एक ही अथॉरिटी के ऊपर वेस्ट कर दिया. जिनको इतिहास से में इंटरेस्ट है, यू विल बी एबल टू अंडरस्टैंड, व्हेन यू वेस्ट political and military power in one person, you make that power, you make that person extremely, extremely powerful. As you go more into your defense and strategic studies course, you will be taught with several other examples like Hitler and so many others who wasted all the powers on themselves and then they did what they did. Anyway, coming back to Xi Jinping. So 15 November 2012 2012, he became General Secretary of Chinese Communist Party and Chairman of Central Military Commission. On 14 March 2013, they also made him the President of China. Now you see what happens. 15 days later, in Durban, South Africa, they were having the summit meeting, जो एकदम स्टेट के हेड के लेवल में होता है, the summit meeting of BRICS, that is Brazil, Russia, India and China. And South Africa. BRICS की summit में, वहां पे Xi Jinping made a statement that the boundary dispute between India and China must be resolved as soon as possible. तो जब उन्होंने ये स्टेटमेंट वहां पे दी, हमारी मीडिया, they were very excited that look, here is a president who wants to solve the boundary problem. But they did not actually at that point in time understand that he was wanting to solve the boundary on his terms. And I say this, that he was wanting to solve the boundary on his terms, because exactly 17 days later, on 15th April 2013, the Depsang face-off took place. Why this Depsang face-off is important? Because the Depsang face-off marks the beginning of this very, very long, ये जो लंबे लंबे फेस ऑफ होने शुरू हो गए. पहले बॉर्डर में फेस ऑफ होता था, ऐसा कि नहीं होता था. We would meet the Chinese, they would see us, we would show our banners, tell them that this is our territory, please go back. At best, we would have the face off for 1 hour, sometimes 2 hours, and we would break contact, go back. But that was the first time when the face off lasted for more than 40 days. Let me show you where is Depsang. Just give me a minute. I will just show you on a slide where is this Depsang. Okay, on this larger map, I will first start from here. Depsang is somewhere here. In the next slide, I will show you this area in a little more detail. Okay. Let me just take out my pointer. Right. So here you see on this, just to connect, this is the Karakoram Pass. This is the Aksai area. This is that road that I mentioned from Xinjiang going down to Lhasa. What you have been hearing in the news, this is the Pengongso Lake. Galwan you have heard of, this is the Galwan River, this is Galwan. And this where I am taking my pointer now is Depsang. So in 2013, we had a 40 plus days face-off over here. And from that time onwards, the duration of the face-off and the level of violence in the face-off started to increase many, many fold. And soon after Depsang in 2013, in 2014, we had a prolonged face-off in the area of Tumar, which is a little further south of this, near Demchok. Then we had face-offs in the area of Demchok. We had number of face-offs in the area of Pengongso. So as I said, the duration also started to increase and the level of violence also started to increase in these face-offs as we kept going ahead. So by and large, if you see what the Chinese did when Xi Jinping said, when Xi Jinping said that we should resolve the boundary as soon as possible, they started to do things by in a manner that they could assert their right, their perception, or जो उनकी समझ थी, they could assert that. So now if you see very broadly on the ground, the strategy that the Chinese were adopting, that the PLA was adopting, कि पहले intrude कर लो. First intrude, assert that this area belongs to you. After that, you start negotiations and you keep protracting the negotiations को लंबा करते रहो ताकि you sort of force your will. So repeatedly, these sort of intrusions kept taking place. And now finally this year, 2020, we have this longish one where we have literally, locked our horns. So now the beginning, as I said, is from 2013. It is almost coinciding with Xi Jinping becoming the all-powerful person in China. And quite specifically, why is this current standoff happening? There can be various reasons. In fact, there will be many reasons that will be there. Fundamental, as I see it, of course, is to put pressure on India. And why put pressure on India? Because over the last 5 years, in fact, a little more than 5-6 years, when Barack Obama used to be the president of US, he was quite dependent on Prime Minister Manmohan Singh for getting the economy, getting his ideas on the economy in the world. G20 was formed and so on. And as you all know, since the time Prime Minister Modi has taken charge, India's stature, Hindustan की जो हैसियत है पूरी दुनिया में, that has gone up many-fold. Now, this is something which is obviously the Chinese are not able to digest. The fact that India is getting close to China, to USA, is something जो उनको हजम नहीं हो रहा है. So therefore, there is this reaction. So on the one side, we have a president who's consolidating his power, अपने आप को और भी ताकतवर बनाते जा रहा है. और दूसरी side है, there is a country which is sort of challenging him again and again. So therefore, I think that is the primary motive. And as flowing from that, the second reason could be that they wanted to check India from going against China on a range of issues, whether it is the allegations or the probe which is going on the origin of the COVID, on the bad handling of the COVID by China. You all are aware of all that. The whole country, the whole world is suffering from it. Plus, India was taking a firm stand against China's conduct in the South China Sea. India ने कई बारी statement दिया है that there must be freedom of navigation, there must be freedom of overflight. That means aircraft should be able to fly, and there must be no disturbance to the lawful commerce that takes place in the international waterways according to the international law. So when India was taking a strong stance, this obviously was not being liked by China. But more immediate, I think, was the fact that in the last 5 to 6 years, India has put in a lot of efforts for developing their infrastructure. मतलब जो border के इलाके में सड़कें हैं, border के इलाके में जो connectivity है, network हैं, इन सब में बहुत improvements हुआ है. Rural electrification हुआ है, you are all aware of this. All of this put together, because of this development which India was doing in its border infrastructure, China was becoming more and more uncomfortable with this. And because they were becoming more and more uncomfortable with this development, they wanted to do something. और इसमें खास करके पिछले साल अक्टूबर में just give me a second, I want to bring up that slide once more so that you are able to you are able to take a look. Just give me a second, I'll just bring up that slide once again so that you can comprehend the exact situation. Okay. So this is let me take out my pointer. Yeah, okay. Now this is the road which Road has been there for a while. काफी देर से इसमें काम चला है. This is the road called DSBO, यानी दौलत बेग ओल्डी श्योक road है ये, which starts from Darbuk. D for Darbuk, S for Shyok, and it follows this roughly alignment जो ये लाल से दिखाया गया है. So around October last year, for a long time, we kept trying, but because of the very, very difficult terrain, वहाँ के जो जमीनी हालात हैं, because of the difficult terrain, we were not being able to be successful with the bridge. बार-बार bridge लगा रहे थे और वो बह जाता था. So eventually we were successful in putting this bridge by very good engineering solution by our border roads. And once this road got connected, actually the Chinese became quite anxious that India will be able to build up their troops very easily in this area that I'm pointing. Primarily, it's called the Daulat Beg Oldie area. You can see Depsang here, Sultan Chukshu, Karakoram Pass, this area. From India's side also, it's a very important area because on the western side, as you can see over here, is the Siachen Glacier, जहाँ पे हमारी अलग लड़ाई चल रही है पाकिस्तान के साथ. किसी और वक्त, some other time, I will tell you about the Siachen, where I have served myself in the beginning of the war in 1986. And on the eastern side is this Siachen area. So for India, this is strategically significant. For Chinese, they feel threatened. So I think to a large extent, this was also a reason why China decided that they need to do something more assertive than what they had done in the past. Fourth reason, well, I think it could also be in line with the China's general aggressiveness that we are witnessing in South China Sea, in East China Sea, in Hong Kong, in Taiwan. So this is very much part of the same thing. And last, fifth, not the least, I think, is also to create some sort of a smoke screen to cover their internal problems. They are having a lot of internal problems. If one single person wants to become all powerful, there are bound to be others who will be dissatisfied. There will be many who will follow the leader, but there will be many who are losing on their aspirations. If you want to become the head of the state forever, obviously other people don't get a chance. So there are bound to be internal political problems. There are internal economic problems. So in order to put a smoke screen, उसके ऊपर एक धुआं का पर्दा डालने के लिए कुछ करो बॉर्डर के साथ बॉर्डर में, ताकि पूरा देश जो है एकजुट हो जाए. People become united. So that definitely is the reason which is there. So under these circumstances, we saw the May 2020. What did they do? हर साल गर्मियों में हम भी अपने troops forward area में लेकर के exercise करते हैं. We carry out some exercises. Similarly, Chinese do the exercises. As per one of the 4 agreements which I mentioned to you, the confidence building measures in the field, both sides inform each other that we will be carrying out our exercises. So the same thing has happened. But after the exercise खत्म करने के बाद, instead of going back to their cantonments and barracks or whatever the Chinese call, instead of going back to their garrison, they decided to go forward and do what they did in this area of Pangong Tso. Pangong Tso के थोड़ा सा ऊपर, the area of Konkala, Hot Springs. These are very, very popular names which kept coming in the newspapers. They were all part of the slide which I showed you. They did that. So India also responded. So that's how this, starting from the first week of May, these kind of contacts and activities took place. Along with that, there was also an action in Sikkim, in North Sikkim to be precise, but rest of the activity has mostly been focused on the western sector in the area that we are talking about. Now let us go fast forward to Galwan. All of you are aware of the Galwan encounter. I'm not going to repeat the details, but basically what happened is on the 15th of June, based on the agreement which was made at the Corps Commander level, when the Indian troops went to verify whether the Chinese had pulled back from the point that they were supposed to pull back, the PLA, whether they have pulled back or not, a very violent encounter took place in which the commanding officer and 19 others were killed. On the Chinese side, if you go by the media reports which are there from multiple sources, it started with the US, United States of America intelligence saying 35 PLA soldiers have died. Then there were other reports which hinted at a figure of 43. Now there are reports which are taking the figure up to as much as 100 or little more than 100. So the Chinese never announced their figures. So neither do they do much to honor their dead. In our case, you all have seen our Prime Minister travel to Ladakh to pay his tribute to the soldiers who had, sacrificed their life in doing what they did. On their side, they don't believe in all this. But the fact of the matter is, they also suffered very serious casualties. Now, after the Galwan incident took place, if you see the Chinese release that came out, they blamed India for doing what happened, which was not at all India was to blame, because if you saw the kind of equipment, जैसे वो जो spikes, जो कील गाड़ करके जो डंडे लेकर के आए थे, they had come fully prepared to cause such kind of injuries over there. So therefore, they were prepared very much for doing what they did. But this is typical of Chinese कि झूठ मूठ में अपना propaganda करते रहो, obfuscate the issue, and keep changing the interpretations. Galwan, for example, was never a disputed area. By about 2002, 2003, more or less by virtue of the multiple negotiations that took place, हमने इंडिया और जो इनके तिब्बत जो चाइना के ऑक्यूपेशन में है उस बॉर्डर के ऊपर में 11 पॉकेट्स आइडेंटिफाई किए हुए थे कि these are the pockets which are disputed on which the negotiations have to be done. Galwan was never part of any of that. Galwan में कोई dispute नहीं था. Yes, in 62 we had a pretty bitter battle over here. In that bitter battle, according to historical accounts, India lost 36 soldiers. Chinese losses were almost 800 soldiers in the Galwan area. But the fact is, there was never any dispute or doubt on where is the border over here. So that's how the Galwan incident took place, and we have seen the outcome of the encounter that took place. Now let's fast forward again to 29th, 30th August to what happened in Pangong Tso, the south bank of Pangong Tso. Just give me 30 seconds. I will bring up that slide once more so that you are able to relate with what is being shown to you. Okay, so we are back to this slide again. Allow me to give a second to take out my pointer. Yeah, here it is. Okay. Now this is the Pangong Tso I had shown it to you earlier also. North bank is where the Chinese intruded in those area of the fingers. आपने newspapers, news, television वगैरह में सुना होगा. So this is where the Chinese had done. They intruded. So what happened is on the night of 29th, 30th August, Indian Army, which is deployed over there, Indian Air Force, which is over there, they observed or they were able to infer some movement which was being contemplated by the PLA, by the Chinese. So they preempted that movement and went and occupied heights along the southern bank of Pangong Tso, roughly along the alignment where I am moving my pointer along. Now, these are areas in which bitter battles were fought in 1962. All those names like Gurung Hill, Magar Hill, these are the points from here, Rizangla. Why this area is very, very significant? Because यहाँ से जैसे Pangong Tso के साथ में there is a valley. Similarly, is Pangur Lakes, Pangur Tso भी बोलते हैं इसको. This is another valley. So like this, then from this side, from the southern side, Dumti, a number of approaches which the enemy can use to come to Chushul. So therefore, if you occupy these heights, this area of Chushul and beyond towards Leh on this side, or through the Dumti Indus Valley towards Leh, they are protected if you hold the heights over here. So when the Indian Army observed, this movement taking place over here, they did a very good preemptive action. They did a very good preemptive action and occupied these heights. This area, parts of it is also known as the Kailash range. So just understand this. why this date and this event is significant? On 29th, 30th, on 29th August, actually, President Xi Jinping was addressing the 7th Central Symposium on Tibet. This is a 5-year event, a very significant event in which चीन के हेड ऑफ द स्टेट होते हैं, उनके जो राष्ट्रपति होते हैं, वो सब पॉलिसी मेकर्स या पॉलिसी इंप्लीमेंटर्स को बताते हैं कि हाउ आर वी गोइंग टू डील विद टिबेट इन द नेक्स्ट 5 years. ये जो इवेंट बीजिंग में हो रहा था, और यहां पर ये जो आदेश दिया था इन्होंने, द इंस्ट्रक्शंस व्हिच ही हैड गिवन वाज दैट you must build Tibet into an impregnable fortress. I tried to get the Gujarati equivalent of this. Impregnable fortress in Gujarati and partially in Hindi means अभेद्य किला. तो ऐसा किला बनाओ जिसमें के बीच में कोई भेद ना कर सके. They wanted to make a very strong fortress, and this is exactly quoted from his speech. And he said that we must protect national unity, educate the people of Tibet in the struggle against splitism. मतलब हमसे टूट करके अलग ना जाएं. Do everything to do that. So therefore, this reading by the Indian Army of a likely PLA movement was very correct, very timely, and the fact that they were able to prevent, the PLA from building more defenses in the area of to defend Tibet was preempted by what we did. So what is Xi Jinping's interest? Xi Jinping, like he's trying to consolidate his power, is also trying to solidify China's grip of whatever remains of Tibet. Let me take you to another slide. Just give me a second. So this is a slide of the Tibetan flag. Okay. Now, what does Xi Jinping wants? He wants to solidify, as I said, China's grip on whatever remains autonomous of the Tibetan autonomous region. Kisi time pe Tibet used to be 2.5 million square kilometers. And when it was in its original size of 2.5 million square kilometers, it was almost 1/4 the size of China. But what did China do? In 1965, they gobbled up, matlab inhone they ate up half the territory of Tibet and made it into 4 provinces of China called Gansu, Qinghai, Sichuan, and Yunnan. ये 4 province जो है, आधी तिब्बत इन्होंने चीन के साथ 4 province बना के जोड़ लिया. So having split Tibet, now they want to make sure that what remains of this so-called Tibetan autonomous region becomes, so solidly integrated, to use his language only, that there is no threat to splitism. Why does he want this kind of a control on Tibet? To understand that, just look at the map in front of you. If you are in an interactive class, I would have asked you the questions and taken this forward, but doesn't matter. That will also happen very soon once this COVID gets over. But the important point to understand here is, because of the fact that Tibet has the 3rd largest ice reserve in the world, a number of rivers are flowing, as you can see on the slide in front of you. Look at the number of rivers that are flowing out of Tibet into all the countries that are adjoining Tibet. So China wants to control the rivers that flow from here to control the waters. Besides, Tibet has got some precious metals, minerals like chromium, gold, iron, magnesium, uranium, silver. It has got coal, it has got gas, it has got oil, and it has got some rare earth minerals. जो China की जो ये नई power है, a lot of it is coming out of the natural resources of Tibet. Look at the way they are developing the road connectivity to Tibet. It's primarily because of this. Of course, military advantages against India. It is also to take all this economic wealth out of Tibet. Recently, they had the fifth conclave of all the former general secretaries of Chinese Communist Party, in which Xi Jinping very proudly announced the second railway line to Tibet. Why are they developing all this? Itni आबादी तो है नहीं तिब्बत में. It is all to draw out the resources. And from a military point of view, if you have two railway line networks coming over here, if you have road network, आप बड़ी आसानी से, बड़ी तेजी से, you can very speedily mobilize and take your forces forward. So that is the kind of combination that they are looking at. Now, going a little back into history, after the 1962 war, unfortunately, India decided to continue its consulates in Lhasa and Tibet, in Lhasa and Shanghai. From December 15, 1962, it was at that time, maybe the decision was taken because they had completely cut off our consulate over there. But soon after the war got over, when the Chinese had invited India to once again re-establish the consulates, for some reason we did not go there, because the leadership that time felt that since Panchsheel had been violated, why should we go there? But by not going there, I think we made a mistake. And after that, every time we have tried to go back to Lhasa. We made an attempt in 2006. When China came back to Kolkata, we wanted to go to Lhasa, but Chinese did not agree, and we were allowed to set up a consulate in Guangzhou in exchange for Kolkata, but that's the way it is. I think that was a sad miss, that we were not able to get back and have a consulate in Lhasa. Anyway, coming back to the events that took place on 29th, 30th August. So basically, since India was able to take up these positions over here on the south bank of Pangong, so we have come, I think, in a very strong position, because of which we are seeing Chinese are going on having talks and going on making offers. Remember, in the very beginning, I told you, intrude, assert, initiate negotiation, and protract negotiation. मतलब negotiation को लंबा खींचते रहो. They're going on trying. Both sides have now developed. Both sides have now, got enough build-up. So what we are hearing now, that the 8th round of Corps Commander level talks that took place and that concluded in the earlier part of this month, I think in the first week of November, they have given some proposals for disengagement, which have appeared in the media. But I think it is important that India must be resolute and make no compromise whatsoever. I'm just coming out of the presentation. Give me a second. Yeah. So I think we must be quite resolute, because by violating the territory and falsely asserting claims, China has undermined all the principles and agreement that we have signed with regard to our conduct on the line of actual control. And side by side, they are on an overdrive now in an intense information warfare or a propaganda campaign, if you will, against India, in which they are going on spreading half-truths and lies repeatedly. In order to continue this, to check India, it is critical that we should remain strong, not only here, but along the other sectors also. You may have heard recently the army chief saying that we are very careful about the developments which are happening in the central sector, that is the Himachal-Uttarakhand border with China, and also on the eastern side, which is, I think, a good sign, because we have to be prepared strongly. And it calls for a hard slog, and not only on the military side, I think also on the economic side. So it is no strange coincidence, ये कोई coincidence नहीं है, when if the Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister, goes to Ladakh and makes a call for Atmanirbhar Bharat from there, there is a purpose with which he is doing it. it is to remind the country that we cannot remain so much dependent on China. एक टाइम था जब हमारे देश में सारे मेडिसिन की जो एपीआई जो बेसिक प्रोडक्ट होती थी सब बनती थी यहाँ पे. अब धीरे धीरे हमने प्रॉफिट मैक्सिमाइज करने के चक्कर में सब कुछ दे दिया है चाइना को. अब हम इतना डिपेंडेंट हो गए कि हमारी बेसिक दवाइयों के लिए भी हम चाइना के इंपोर्ट के ऊपर डिपेंडेंट हो गए. सो आई एम जस्ट गिविंग यू वन एग्जांपल. देयर आर सेवरल एग्जांपल्स. सो मच सो कि जो आप घर में राजमा खाते हो उसकी भी डिपेंडेंसी अभी हमारी चीन के ऊपर इतनी ज्यादा हो गई है. सो द पॉइंट इज आई थिंक वी हैव टू कम आउट ऑफ दैट and become more and more, Atmanirbhar is the word which the Prime Minister talks about. So it is not only with the military. I think it is important that it is done even in the economic domain. The other point that we must remember that already we can see the correction in the policy. Our bilateral relationship with China cannot be disassociated from the border issue. The border issue, we cannot say that okay, border ko baad mein karte hain. Let us develop the economic relationship first. We have seen the trapping of this sort of a policy. We have become so dependent on them that sometimes, we are forced to rethink on issues of our interest in the border. I think it is important that we keep them combined together, and the whole thing must be looked at as one single piece with regard to the future of our relations with China. The second point, why is China not solving the border issue with India? It has solved its border issue with so many other countries. It is not doing so because it finds it convenient to use as a lever whenever they want, whether it is for geopolitical reasons, whether it is for strategic reasons, whether it is for economic reasons, to use it as a pressure against India. So therefore, I think we need to be firm and keep this as part of the larger relationship. The other thing, if you see, I just mentioned to you how hawkish he is, कितने aggressive है, कितने offensive है वो तिब्बत के बारे में. So to expect that with this Tibet issue all the time as a threat in his mind कि split ना कर जाए, will he ever resolve the thing with India? So therefore we have to be prepared, as I said, a much, with a longer outlook, with a longer haul with regard to this area. So finally, to conclude, I must say, first, India must look after her own interests and its own security. Second, whatever we do, we should be most concerned about ourselves, about our interest, and हमें इस बात की ज़्यादा परवाह नहीं होनी चाहिए कि what the others are thinking about, particularly what the Chinese are thinking about. We have to do what is in our interest. And finally, I must mention the way China is conducting itself, not only with India. We have seen the kind of threats जो ये डरावने statement देते हैं against Australia, for example, against Japan, for example. अभी हाल ही में जो USA के खिलाफ में जो दे रहे हैं कि you better don't think of decoupling. You cannot survive without Chinese economy. So basically, China is a country which still believes that power comes from the barrel of a gun, whereas the rest of the world has moved ahead. I think China is still, in that arrogance of power, and this is typically what happens when you make one single person all powerful. So therefore, I think as a country, we have to be prepared, as I said repeatedly, for the long haul. As a country, we must be firm, we must be resolute to be able to deal with China. On that note, I will stop here. My time exactly finishes now. It's 12 noon, and I will hand you over back to my friend Nirmal Matthews to moderate the question and answer session. So it's back to you, Nirmal.
Rightly said, sir. Thank you so much for the lecture. If there are participants who would like to ask questions to Lieutenant General Saha, sir, about the subject matter of the lecture, you're most welcome.
So may I go ahead?
Yes, Suraj, please.
So first of all, very good afternoon to Lieutenant General, sir. It was really great listening to you, and of course the technical assessment, which is otherwise not available in public domain. So a few days back, I was going through an interview of a lieutenant general. He's retired. He's a retired lieutenant general, and he happens to be the chancellor of Kashmir University. He proposed a theory wherein he stated that China's move and China's act, the way it acted in Ladakh, is part of a bigger agenda wherein it was aiming to look at how India wished to react and prepare itself accordingly. How viable do you think, or how sensible do you think this statement was?
You see, inherent in a military action like this is this statement that you have just spoken about by this gentleman. Because once you are carrying out, let me just reconnect with what I had said for the benefit of others in my talk, that they had come there for an exercise. ये हर साल समर में exercise के लिए आते हैं. So from that, after the exercise got over, instead of going back to the garrison, they came and moved ahead like this. So what I am trying to say, it is not a sudden and ये कोई ऐसा action नहीं था कि अचानक इन्होंने कर दिया. They had planned for it and they had come. If they had planned for it and they had come, why did they plan like that? I gave you 5 reasons for it. That these are the 5 reasons why they may have chosen to carry out that action. And amongst that, from a military point of view, it was the threat which was there because India was successful after trying for so many years to connect the Daulat Beg Oldi area by road, which, as you have seen, on the eastern side is Aksai Chin, on the western side is Siachen. So therefore, it's so when somebody assesses that it is to probe India's reaction, obviously it is inherent in a military action like that. Having said that, let me also explain to you, I think the Chinese never imagined that India would react the way it did. First, the way India mobilized. Mobilized का मतलब होता है कि बाकी इलाकों से आप एडिशनल ट्रूप्स लेकर के पॉइंट ऑफ डिसीजन में आप लेकर के आते हैं. So what they did, India mobilized a number of additional forces. Unfortunately, I am not in a position to give you the exact numbers, but by and large, जो मीडिया में निकल रहा है आप उसको देख सकते हैं. So they mobilized the number of troops over there. So once they saw this mobilization, even the Chinese had to mobilize more. So they had to start bringing in troops from other places. So we saw mobilization taking place on the Chinese side. So that was the first surprise. They never thought India is going to mobilize so many troops and so. The second thing, in the mobilization between India and China, for China it is relatively easier because Tibet is a plateau. For India, we have to take our troops through the Himalayas. It has got its own challenge. Despite that challenge, we were able to pull it off the way we did. Third point, when Galwan happened, they never thought that they are going to get back such a beating. Actually, Galwan was a shocker to them. And the third one, I think, was the 29th, 30th August action that took place south of Pangong Tso. So militarily, they never thought India is going to respond the way they did. So having done all this, I think by the reactions of India and by the preemptive action, particularly south of Pangong Tso, I think Chinese have got a good answer to what this analyst was pointing out. It was to probe India's reaction. I think it has been a very good reaction. I have mentioned the Army's reaction. Similarly, if you see, the Indian Air Force has reacted. Similarly, if you see in the Indian Ocean, the Indian Navy has also deployed. And it is not only Indian Navy in Indian Ocean. If you see, one after the other, we are carrying out multilateral exercise with different countries, which is definitely giving an indication to China that it is not only India. There are larger, shall we say, formations, groupings, which are going to come into play. I hope I have answered your question, Suraj.
Yes, sir. Very well, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Venkat, do you have a question? Venkat Lokanathan, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. General Saha, Jai Hind. Dr. Venkat here. I would say my comment is more linked to what General Saha said previously on our response to the situation. General Saha, if you could kindly elucidate a little more on what happened in Doklam, which was again a response that possibly caught the Chinese by surprise. So if you could just explain this a little more for the benefit of the audience, sir. Thank you.
Okay, the question which Dr. Venkat Lokanathan has asked is about Doklam. पहली बात तो जिनको डोकलम के बारे में पता नहीं, डोकलम जो है ईस्टर्न सेक्टर में पड़ता है. तो मैंने बताया था शुरू में वेस्टर्न सेक्टर जिसके बारे में आज की हमारी पूरी बातचीत हुई, फिर सेंट्रल सेक्टर और ये ईस्टर्न सेक्टर. तो ये ईस्टर्न सेक्टर की लगभग शुरुआत मानी जाती है सिक्किम साइड में. तो यहाँ पर ऑलमोस्ट सिमिलर सिचुएशन हुआ था 2017. मैं ऑलमोस्ट सिमिलर इसलिए बोल रहा हूं क्योंकि उस टाइम पे ये they did not intrude into Indian territory. PLA intruded into Bhutanese territory. But by intruding into the Bhutanese territory, what were they doing? They were trying to threaten India in this Siliguri corridor. Siliguri corridor, हम उसको बोलते हैं, that narrow link that the northeast of India has along the land with the rest of the country into Bengal and further west for other parts of India. So वहां पे आकर के they were trying to push themselves closer toward that Siliguri corridor. So when they did what they did, once again India responded. First of all, it was very resolute, stopping the PLA from trying to come over there, and that basically the tri-junction which is there between India, Bhutan and Tibet. So they prevented the PLA from coming over there. And thereafter, it was a longish face-off, I think 72 or 72 days over there. And finally, it remained like a face-off till President Xi Jinping met our Prime Minister, and it was agreed that both sides will pull out. Although both sides have pulled out from there, but PLA has made some additional infrastructure to facilitate quicker mobilization into the future. So that is how the Doklam has taken place. So what I will do, particularly for my participants of the BA Defense and Strategic Studies, when we discuss that sector in one of our later lectures, I will talk about Doklam at much greater length. I do hope Dr. Venkat will be present that time also, so we can talk about it at much greater length. But the point which he was trying to emphasize, that India has started responding much more strongly than it was in the past. I think is the common factor between this as well as between the Doklam and what we have spoken about today. I hope, Venkat, that's what you are looking for?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
thanks.
So we have two more questions in the chat box, sir. Yagnik has asked a question about India has always talked about the POK at the various international forums, but we never talked about the Chinese occupied Kashmir, that's Shaksgam Valley, Aksai, which is now in Leh UT. So just a statement he's given.
Can you just mention who is the person who asked the question?
So this is Yagnik, sir. Yagnik. This is asked by the chat box, sir.
Okay, he's not there?
He's asked it by the chat box, sir.
Can't you see him there?
No, sir. He's...
Okay, doesn't matter. Yasnik, it's a very, very good question. It's a very, very good question. Just give me a second. I will take out the slide so that we are able to relate to that. Just give me a second, please. Okay. So this is the area which Yasnik has asked. It is called the Shaksgam Valley. In 1963, soon after 1962, the Pakistanis thought this is a time to take advantage against India. In 47-48, after they were pushed out of Kashmir and so on, they kept trying, and as by that time they signed various treaties called the Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, Central Treaty Organization of the US. They started getting arms supplies from the US and so on. So they thought they were getting stronger and they wanted to, do something to please the Chinese as well. So therefore, and of course make strategic gains out of that. So therefore, in 1963, they illegally ceded 5,180 kilometers, 5,180 kilometers of the Shaksgam Valley, roughly in this area. So this is the area that Yasnik is talking about, and I think this is a significant part of the
Please wait for 5 minutes.
Nirmal, am I audible?
Audible, sir.
Okay, I think there must have been a little technical glitch. Is the camera also there? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Participants can hear you as well, sir.
Okay, has the camera also come on? No.
No, sir, not yet, sir.
Okay, no problem. So if you can hear me,
Yes.
Yasnik, what I was saying is okay. Yasnik, what I was saying, so that's how in 1963 they illegally ceded this area, and I think it is important for us to keep this, as you're very correctly trying to hint at. It's very important for us to keep it in the course of our discussions wherever they are, and not lose sight of this territory which was illegally ceded by Pakistan to China. More recently, we are also seeing developments in Gilgit-Baltistan and so on. And what we will do is, when we discuss events related to Pakistan, Gilgit-Baltistan and all, we will touch upon this in greater detail, because this area is extremely significant. You saw it on the slide. It sits just north of Karakoram, so it is a very significant area. Next, please.
Right, sir. Amit Kumar has a question, sir. Sir, do you think that the step of India is enough to counter the salami slice policy of China?
Just repeat this again.
So I quote, sir, Amit Kumar's question. Sir, do you think that the step of India is enough to counter the salami slice policy of China?
Okay. Salami slicing, like those of you who have actually seen salamis being sliced, वो क्या करते हैं, पतला 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 पीस काट करके उससे निकालते हैं. So quite clearly, what they were trying to do here, primarily, as you can see, एक तो 2013 onwards, whatever is going on in Depsang, now they wanted to come and literally sit on the Galwan Heights, close to the bridge which has been constructed. On the Pangongso side, the understanding of India on the Chinese line should be finger 8. They wanted to come to finger 2. South bank of Pangongso, of course, they did not. We have gone and taken. So basically, if you see, the slice of the salami was being sought in the fingers area, little bit in the hot spring area, and Galwan area. So that has been blocked. So therefore, in this area, for the moment, the salami slicing has been denied. But whether it will be enough for all the other areas, the answer is no. We have to be careful. We have to put this entire area under very high degree of surveillance, ability to acquire targets and ability to carry on, ability to have reconnaissance in this area. So it is extremely important that we are able to respond to any future attempts at salami slicing in any other sector any other theater. Yeah.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir. There's one more question, sir. Abhinav Borgohain has asked this question. Sir, as you mentioned that near the Siachen Glacier, we're facing a problem from China as well as Pakistan on the other side. So, sir, don't you think this is a step taken by China in support of Pakistan? And how will India tackle this problem if China again puts pressure in that particular region?
Again, it's a very good question. Since you can't see my camera, I'm not very sure if will you be able to see if I share the screen and bring up the slide again. Let me try, just give me a minute, if it works. Nirmal, can you see the slide?
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay.
Not visible.
So there seems to be a glitch with that. Never mind. You see, like this question which has come, I think it's a very good question because this is what we talk about a collusive threat. Okay, if indeed we had not responded the way they did, they would have been able to achieve what your question is hinting at. By doing so and by improving our positions further, we should be able to prevent it. But that said, the fact that India is engaged with PLA, with China in eastern Ladakh, we are definitely noticing an emboldenment in Pakistan. This emboldenment is happening because of this action. B, also the way Pakistan is receiving military supplies from China. Recently, they have received a whole lot of radars and things like that, and we are noticing that these radars, etc., are getting deployed. And side by side, we are seeing some new emboldenment, which is translating into what is happening in Jammu and Kashmir. This year, I'm going a little bit from this side to the Pakistani side because the question is like that. This side, since they have not much succeeded in infiltration, typically by the month of October, November, if you go by past standards, usually around 130 plus infiltration, they are able to succeed of terrorists. This time around, they have succeeded only with about 30. And these are figures which are from various assessments which are there. Now, if you see, what are they trying to do? If you have been noticing in the last about 14 days or so, repeated attempts at infiltration supported by cross line of control firing. And this kind of cross line of control firing, whose intensity is comparatively much higher. Why is the intensity higher? Because of the sense of emboldenment which is there because of what's happening on Eastern Ladakh. So therefore, we have to be prepared to deal with situations like this. We have to develop more capability to be able to deal with situations like this. Right now, it has been taken care of. And more caution is being exercised. Side by side, we have to be capable of handling it from both sides. This is exactly which will require a very high degree of coordination between the Army, the Air Force, the Central Armed Police Forces who are deployed like ITBP on that side, BSF on the western side, and so on. I think this is a major challenge, a security challenge, which is quite often termed to as a two-front scenario. Some people also call it 2.5 front scenario. Sometime later in your course, we will discuss all these multiple front scenarios and all. So much for now.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir. Are there any more questions for Lieutenant General Saha?
Hello.
Yes, Saubhagya, please. Yes, Saubhagya.
Yeah. Good afternoon, sir, and thank you for such a wonderful session. I just had a minor doubt. Like I somewhat sense that the history is repeating itself, because when we look at the Indo-China relations, the rise of Panchsheel, the NAM ideology, the Zohu-Nehru talks, it was after that we faced brutal wars or brutal conflicts. The same can be the same aggression is felt somewhat in recent times, especially after the informal summits, especially the last one which was held at Mamlapuram in the last year. I sense is there a pattern in which the Chinese are functioning, or do we have to look closely into their foreign policy in order to assess how they are moving about, or how they are moving forward?
Saubhagya, I think you asked a very, very pertinent question. To my mind, it is not history is repeating itself. to my mind, history is evolving. Why I say this? If you look at the conduct of the Chinese and the PLA in the past, say pre-2013, why again and again I keep going back to 2013 when Xi Jinping became that all-powerful that he's trying to become. By and large, China's policy towards India was to contain India. Okay, wherever it is, shall we say, competitive, conflicting, and so on. And thereafter, take advantage of India as much as they can economically for their own interests. From the Indian side also, we thought it is in our interest to develop the economic relationship and so on. And we did what we did. Wrong, right, is another analysis. We can save it for some other day. But the point is, by and large, China's approach towards India was to contain India. Now we are seeing that contain has moved to degrade. Now they want to degrade India's influence. And look at the way they are operating, for example, in Nepal. Look at the way they are trying to operate in Bangladesh. Look at the way they are trying to operate in Sri Lanka. I think we are, and of course, not to forget Pakistan. We are definitely seeing a trend that go to any extents to degrade India's influence in the region and try to sort of coerce India from engaging with other powers in the world. So that's the approach which China is trying to, deal with us. So in a situation like this, when they are trying all, very recently, you must have also heard the Chinese Quad, but it's a very loose terminology given by the media. By Chinese Quad, they are talking about China, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and so on, Pakistan. So the point is they are trying to create all kinds of counter influences in all these countries, also Myanmar. So therefore, we have to be able to deal with this situation, and quite evidently, in a situation like this, you cannot be dealing alone. You have to find common grounds, converge interests with like-minded countries who have similar values and ethos like ours, like democracy, and so on. So therefore, we have to not only be strong ourselves, we have to make strong partnerships with like-minded countries to be able to deal with the situation as it is evolving, to be sure that, like you have said, history does not repeat itself.
Right, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. So Amit Kumar has a second question, sir, but we'll just wait for a minute.
Go ahead, no problem.
We'll just wait for a minute for some technical to come up.
Okay. Thank you.
Right, sir. Amit Kumar has a question, sir. That whether the yes,
there
sir.
is a question, Nirmal, which I saw from Surat side here.
Yes, sir. There's another. Before Surat, sir, Amit has asked one more question, sir.
Go ahead.
Yes, sir. So Amit's question is whether the Quad can help India in any way to maintain peace on border and free navigation in the Indo-Pacific region, sir.
See, Quad, for the benefit of those who are not familiar with it, well, the Quad comprises, or rather it is a concept as of now, I think, comprising India, US, China, sorry, my mistake, Australia and Japan, right? So that is what it is. So if the way the whole thing is, and also the recent developments that we are noticing some time back, the United States re-christened their Pacific Command as Indo-Pacific Command. That was, I think, a very significant and bold decision which was done. More recently, if you see, what the US has done, they have started designating their fleets by numbers for positioning at various places. So from the US side, I think we are seeing some very, very strong actions which are, coming towards, leading towards greater cooperation between these four countries of the Quad. The other thing is, at a bilateral level between India and US, we have now formed a new formulation called the 2+2 dialogue. By 2+2, we say from Indian side, the two are the defense minister and the external affairs minister. And likewise, their counterparts from the US, that is Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of State. So by making it as a 2+2, combining defense and external affairs together, you are actually making your relationship with that other country much more coordinated. And if it is more coordinated, obviously you are much more strong. Similarly, if you see, with Japan also, progressively, we are changing the flavor of our relationship from one in which was more to do with economic strain and all. We are seeing defense coming in more and more into the dialogue arena, if you will. And even Japan also, from a situation where it was only talking about self-defense forces, it is also looking at its defense responsibilities in a much bigger way. So with these two countries, we were carrying out various exercises, mostly in the sea. With US, of course, we were carrying out some land exercises also, primarily to do with counterterrorism and all that. But the point is, yes, the cooperation was there. Their famous exercise, Malabar, you must have heard of. It used to be once upon a time on a bilateral format. Now we are seeing more and more it is becoming a multilateral format. So therefore, these countries, the Quad countries are coming together. So therefore, we are seeing a greater cooperation. Now, obviously, the way the geography is disposed, this cooperation we will see more visibly in the ocean. And on the land, obviously, India has to take on its frontiers by itself. India does not believe in allowing other forces to come and fight on its frontiers, no. But definitely in terms of intelligence, in terms of surveillance, sharing of information and all that, we will see more happening. For those of you who follow India-US relations, all those foundational agreements which were there, like LIMOA, BECA, COMCAS, or whatever their equivalents are in this context, they have all been signed now. So therefore, the bonds are going stronger. So it is just as well that all the four countries are strengthening their mutual bilateral relationship first. I think that is important because it gives you a much stronger foundation on which you can build your partnership that you're looking for amongst the four countries. So to that extent, I think we are going to see much more cooperation. There are people who also question, okay, now that there is a change in the US presidency, will this change? I don't think so, because these are larger national interests. Some tweaking here and there may take place, because we are also hearing some statements coming that, okay, from US that complete decoupling, economic decoupling with China is not possible, and so on and so forth. But the point is, I think between the two countries, it is literally a new Cold War which is happening between US and China. Will that change, or can that change? At what cost will it change? Irrespective of who has got voted to power, you cannot shy away from the fact that the American economy, American jobs have improved because of the changed policy. So in democracy, at the end of the day, your own people's interest is primary. If your own people's interest is primary, the strategic relationships will also be aligned towards your own people's interests. So therefore, I see good potential in these countries working together on a pretty wide spectrum of fields.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir. Suraj has a question, sir. So when speaking of India's influence in the Asian corridor, there's massive Chinese influence in Laos, Cambodia, Pakistan, and other countries which are in close proximity with India. How important do you think is a foreign policy will play a role here? And how helpful is a friendly neighborhood on these border issues, in your opinion?
See, actually, I think somewhere, I think Suraj is hinting at India's relationship with the BIMSTEC, ASEAN and beyond. I think that is where his question is coming from. And seeing the surname, Suraj Saikia, I am not surprised at all that the question comes, because many times we have heard that if India has to go beyond looking east to act east, it has to go through Northeast India. So this question coming from Suraj Saikia, I'm not surprised at all. In fact, I'm fascinated you're doing that. If you have the patience, on 4th December, I am speaking at a webinar being conducted by IIT Guwahati on this same topic. I will send you the link. You're welcome to attend that also. But just to give you a very brief answer to your question, I think it is very important for India to have good relations with ASEAN. You know, some people also ask this question nowadays that India has not signed the RCEP. You know, that regional something economic, whatever the full form is, in which ASEAN has signed, Australia has signed, I think Japan has signed. I don't think we need to get overly worried. What is more important for us is we have good bilateral relations with almost all these ASEAN countries. We have good relations with Japan. We have good relations with Australia. And this is where we need to focus, because we don't need to be part of any formulation which is under a larger umbrella of China. Somebody had asked a question earlier, will history repeat itself? If you have learned from the past, you will not make mistake in the future. So therefore, I think it is important to have good relations with all of them. And India's immediate neighborhood, which you just mentioned in passing, I think that's absolutely crucial. And you are seeing a lot of, sort of impetus which is being given to that. Last month, the foreign secretary and the army chief visited Myanmar together. If you saw that, then the foreign secretary and the army chief visited Nepal in quick succession. And if you are noticing, even from Nepal, we are seeing changes. What was happening in the month of July, with regard to those maps, those boundary issues and all. Now, when Prime Minister Oli has written to Prime Minister Modi, the map that he has referred, or rather the map that he has used on wherever, that's what the reports are there in the media, is the map which was the older one. So that means the sensitivity is there to what India is saying, because in any case, the border discussions are on with Nepal. On the other hand, if you see, it is once again the PLA was shifting those boundary pillars even with Nepal. Somebody asked about salami slicing by using military. Here is salami slicing by using the contractor and the labor, by shifting boundary pillar. So which Nepal, obviously, it has not gone down well. So what I'm trying to emphasize is the point that we have to be sure that we have good relations with all our immediate neighbors, whether it is Nepal, whether it is Bhutan, Myanmar, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Maldives. Everybody is extremely important for us.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. We have a last question from Jayender, sir. Sir, what would be the strategy of the Indian military establishments to prevent further incursions of the PLA, given the fact that PLA incursions are normal these days?
In the very beginning, I said Jai Hind and Tagda Raho. So I have a two-word answer to your question, Tagda Raho, be strong. The only way by which you can deal with this country is by being strong.
Right, sir. Right, sir. I think Abhinav's question you had answered while you were talking about the Quad question. So you had asked about the change in the US foreign policy after Joe Biden presidency. So I think you had answered that during the Quad question, sir. Okay. Any other questions from the participants? Shekhar, sir, if you have a question.
Me? Okay. I have some simple questions from international. I will talk of China and India from international security perspective. If we see the decline of Soviet Union as a major military power, why it declined? Because of the economic insecurity which they were having in the 80s. And the American and the Britishers, they realized soon that the collapse was there in Soviet Union. What I wanted to say that after 1990, we saw the peaceful rise, what the Chinese says, the peaceful rise of China, what it means, that peaceful rise of China on the one hand, and on the other hand, they talk of the aggressive policy, which ever country, when most of the countries are facing this problem of aggressiveness of Chinese policy that is based on Sun Tzu philosophy of war, deception and surprise. So this is what I want to say, want to ask the general, that how long will China will sustain with the growth, with the military growth? Economically, at the moment, it is strong. The country is feeding more than 100 countries. For how much? For how long? If you go by the history, we saw the rise and fall of many dynasties, Rome, Greeks, and in the case of Indian history, we saw the rise and fall of many dynasties, and everything was there. So how long the Chinese will be able to pursue this kind of policy they are having? That is a mixed one. Economic, they are giving importance to economic, or they are giving importance to the military factor in their conduct of the foreign or security policy. This is one point. In another important, general has mentioned of the unity of command, that the political and military power should, as we see in the case of China, the political and military power are in the hand of a single person. That is true in the communist states. In communist states, we generally find that these two powers are in the hand of the single person. But in a democratic countries or in a country from a government, these two things are in a separate hand. But what I want to say that if the concentration, or I want to ask the general, if the concentration is one hand, is in a particular person, that in the long run, the country will be a loser, because if a weak ruler or a weak, you can say, government comes, just like the people, they are saying that Biden is not so, maybe not so powerful than Trump, then what will happen? This is my only suggestion. This is my comment.
Thank you, sir.
I must firstly thank you very much, sir, for your observations which you have made. Both are very, very, in fact, they are hardly questions, they are observations which you have made out of your immense, study in this subject and in this field. In fact, you are the author of several books on all these issues that you have highlighted. And all I can say is to substantiate some of the points which you have made. And you see, in today's world, I think one is to be economically strong. And along with the economic strength comes military strength. In today's world, it is equally important to be strong technologically. And I think this is where China is lagging. So far, they were managing by all kinds of means, legal and illegal, unscrupulous methods, by sponsoring research, by sending PLA people in the garb of being civilian students to universities in the US, Canada, UK, Europe, all over the place, and stealing technologies, getting ideas, bringing back people in. Big time sponsorship. In fact, if you go back and see a report which Indian Defense and Institute for Defense and Strategic Analysis from Delhi, Manohar Parikar, IDSA, they have published it. They have traced back on some of the viruses that have been created out of Chinese-sponsored programs in Canada and in the US, and all kinds of complex networking. So they have tried. They are trying very hard to get hold of technologies from elsewhere. But now, since almost world over, this awakening has come on what this is happening. So this is something which has come to hurt them. Second thing is through the economic route also, by compelling by the might of their economic power to set up shop in China. Obviously, they are getting the benefit of the technology. So no doubt they have gained a lot by all these means, as I said, legal and illegal put together. But that said, because now countries have become careful, because we are seeing policies like America First and what have you, So therefore, there is much greater caution which is being exercised. And that it is making an impact on the Chinese mind. It comes out very clearly in this recent, the fifth conclave that they held of all their past chairmen of the CCP, General Secretaries of the CCP that they had. One of the points that Xi Jinping kept laboring on was the importance of innovation for China's growth. So that means it is hurting. If you see the defense white paper that was published in July 2019, there are a lot of space and matter has been devoted towards innovation. In fact, their military modernization is also getting hurt because of innovation, because of technology. So I think that is an area which will continue to haunt them, but they will make up because economic strength is there. So they are able to devote so much into research and development, which is very important. In fact, on this issue, I think there are many lessons that India needs to pick up and take forward. Now this, the Chinese translation of the word of consolidating power in Xi Jinping, the nearest English translation is that he is being made the helmsman. I mean, if you become the helmsman, how many years can you remain on the helm? That is a big question. The last time when they had such consolidation of power, it was only in the times of Mao Zedong. After that, we have never seen such consolidation of power, and this is something which is definitely, going to hurt, because when you become so autocratic, I think the chances are that you will make more mistakes rather than do things more successfully. So we'll have to wait and see, because how long, if you go, the periods that a country remains in the number one position, it is reducing as we are going. If you go if you see from the past civilization-wise, civilizations were there for 2,000 years, 3,000 years. Whereas if you see the number of years that Britain was the ultimate power, it was far lesser. Now the US is feeling threatened in 200 years, if I'm not mistaken. so that dynamic is changing. And I think a mixture of all of this. In fact, I would suggest one of the students can take a cue from what the professor has asked and do a little research paper on this. You will find it very exciting and very interesting, and we would be happy to, for you to give a talk to all others, including us, on what did you find from this this hypothesis which the professor has given to us. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
As rightly said by Saha sir, I think it's a time of Pax Sinica now, and I think like-minded countries like India and the US should join together to break that stronghold and helmsmanship of Xi Jinping. Thank you, sir. I invite Colonel Deepak Joshi, who's a professor at the School of Military Affairs, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. We had a very interesting and a very invigorating kind of a lecture from General Subrata Saha today. Firstly, I would like to thank all our audience. There were more than 100 people at one point of time, and that shows that there was quite an interest which was generated. And we are very sorry that Google Meet does not allow more than 100 people. Next time we will choose a more suitable platform. And the questions which were asked show the quality of impact which it had on the audience. And in fact, the question and answer session went on for a very long time. So our audience, we are very thankful to you, and hopefully this lecture series will continue every Wednesday, and we will request General Saha to continue it, and we will look for a better platform. My sincere thanks to General Saha, who has so simply put such a complex topic so simply, and taken us from the history of the entire episode down to what is happening in the present, and what also he has thrown some light on what we can expect in the future, and why China is so interested in this region, and why it is testing, so as to say, probably is testing us how we are going to react, and the Indian reaction has been very fine, I must say that. So thank you very much, Chandra. It was very, very important, and my to all of us, our participants and the speakers. Thank you very much. We end on a very good note today, and we will meet again very soon. Thank you.
Thank you.